Detroit is now the largest U.S. city to file for bankruptcy.
Detroit cannot manage itself. It can't meet its payroll.
We're at the end of the road. We can't borrow any more money.
What happened? Detroit was once prosperous. Now it's such a wreck that
for $1,500 you could buy this house.
Right.
For years, politicians promised they would fix Detroit.
Detroit shall again become the great city that is its destiny.
But instead,
they turned City Hall into a den of bribes and kickbacks, making themselves rich.
Is there hope for places like Detroit?
We are going to turn around the city of Detroit.
This is the Motor City. And this is what we do.
What's up with Detroit? And can this happen to your town? That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
Detroit was once the richest city in America. I was 3 years old then. That was in 1950. Now it's the biggest U.S. city ever to declare bankruptcy. So what happened? Our guests tonight have some clues. First, Fox News reporter Charlie LaDuff works in Detroit and just wrote Detroit, an American autopsy. Charlie, an autopsy, one examines a dead body and tries to find out what killed him. Detroit isn't dead exactly with bankruptcy, but what killed Detroit?
What killed Detroit? Racial conflict killed Detroit. Sloth killed Detroit. Corruption killed Detroit. Seems like that's what's become the American way, because Detroit's not alone. What's Baltimore going to do? What's Atlanta going to do? What is L.A. going to do, for God's sakes? So,
but Detroit is in worse shape. Worse politicians, more unions, the automakers collapsing. That's what a lot of people say. It wasn't the politicians' fault. It was just the big three crashed.
It was all of them. You know, we're a one-industry town. We were rich. We thought it would never end. Everybody put their hand in the till, from management to politicians to unions. You could punch in your buddy while he went drinking. We blew it. And I know everybody's watching Detroit, not because you care about us, but you're worried you're going to be like us.
That's true. We want to see, well, maybe bankruptcy is the answer, but this may mean stiffing the people who were promised pensions. They may get 20 cents on the dollar of what they were promised.
I know. I mean, the golden age is over, isn't it? I mean, we just really ruined it. And we're in a new era now. Who even knows what money's worth? What's a promise worth? What's a contract worth? Our pensioners might take a very bad hit. That's just what was left us. Neglect, sloth, and ripping the people off. The people didn't take it. Who took it? Who took it?
You write, Detroit was perpetually on fire. What do you mean?
We have 7,000 arsons a year. Do the math. What is that? 30 a day? And we have a fire department where the alarms don't work inside. There's holes in the boots. The engines leak water. Sometimes the engines show up and can't pump water. That's not the fault of the... Go ahead.
They took out the fire poles, sold the brass.
Sold them, scrapped them. They did. Everything. Gone. Everything now is up for sale.
The city did manage to build a new $60 million building to house fire department officials. And you tried to confront the deputy fire commissioner about that. He wasn't eager to talk.
Deputy commissioner.
What's that?
I'm not sure if he was talking to me, Detroit, or he was talking to you.
I didn't hear that exactly.
Sir, you're in charge of the maintenance of these firehouses. We're spending $60 million on a new public safety headquarters, and the houses we visited today should be condemned. How do you respond to that?
You're responsible for telling the truth. Why don't you tell the truth?
Well, let me get that so you can...
In this case, this man was actually fired for doing that.
Yeah, as he should have been. You don't get to slap people around because you're unhappy with what they ask you, especially in your official capacity as the man responsible for making sure those houses are clean and safe, and not like some backwater whorehouse in Tijuana with feces bubbling through the floor. I don't know, John. Is it acceptable where you live? Is it acceptable that 911 breaks down and goes dark for 15 hours?
Yeah, in Detroit now, if you call 911, you can't be sure the police will come. You interviewed one single woman living alone, had been robbed, and was afraid to go inside her home because the thieves might still be there. She was waiting for the police.
Police, I called them an hour ago, and they have still not gotten here.
They got the TV, the game machine, the laptop. 1.5 hours and still no cops. Cops arrive 4 hours later. And they say they came as soon as they were assigned the call.
Now, you say sometimes the whole system goes down, but even when the system isn't down, there just aren't enough cops, or it's badly managed?
All of the above. It's badly managed. We don't have enough squad cars sometimes to carry the cops around. Their cars don't have computers in them. The cars don't have radios in them. They use their cell phones. Are you kidding me? Imagine one of our ladies goes to work, comes home, somebody's broken in. I want the muscle to show up and make sure she's safe so she can get in her house. We can't even do that. So what do? We let all the citizens arm themselves. And now we're all going to be our own police. And you see how that's working out in America.
It may work out better than relying on government.
Well, now we got this Trayvon Martin deal, right? So maybe we're thinking it didn't work out better. Maybe we should leave policing to police.
Let's look at a new documentary about Detroit. It shows what parts of the city are like now.
This is 3 bedrooms. The basement down here, I think it was firebombed.
A lot of the antisocial behavior and violence we find is because communities are broken down. People don't interact with one another, they don't support each other in these difficult economic times, and in many cases they don't see themselves as a community even though they may live next door to one another.
It's bad to other people because other people didn't grow up over here, but to us it's just regular, you know what I'm saying? It's regular, it ain't nothing to us.
The documentary was made by Andrew Rodney, who grew up in a suburb of Detroit. You title your film D-Force. Why? What's that mean?
D-Force means to take property from its rightful owner by force. And we titled it that because I can't think of a more accurate word to describe what's happened in the last 50 years in Detroit.
The politicians would say, hey, we have a plan. We can build these cool new buildings with our friends here, and they would use eminent domain to kick people out of their homes and make it worse.
Yes, that happened many times. It happened with the building of I-75. It happened with the Poletown plant, where GM...
The Poletown plant was a neighborhood called Poletown, where lots of people lived.
Yes.
Politicians said, we'll put an auto plant in there.
Mm-hmm. And they kicked out thousands of people to make space for that auto plant.
It was the politicians' vision. So what makes Detroit worse than other cities?
Well, John, Detroit's just the first. It's the first city to experience a lot of the planning that went into a lot of cities. The Federal Home Loan Bank Board was a national program, but it was first in Detroit where they really started to build up neighborhoods around these federal subsidies, which sprawled them out and also racially segregated them.
Detroit has the 3rd highest income tax of any major city, and yet there's no money. How can that be? Where's it go?
I'd love to know where the money went, but better where'd the people go? Listen, when you pay the high income taxes, the only utility tax in the state, the highest car insurance, the highest homeowners insurance, the schools stink, and you get no police. You know what happens to the money and the people paying taxes? They hit 8 Mile Road, and the only people left are people broke paying the highest income taxes, but you know what 10% of a dollar is? 10 cents.
Now, both of you talk about this 8 Mile Road, and it's the title of the M&M movie. You worked at a plant on... What's the significance of 8 Mile Road?
Well, 8 Mile Road's a 8-lane highway, but it might as well be a border between two countries. It's the dividing line between Detroit and the northern suburbs. And things politically, economically...
Rich and poor.
Pretty much. And things on both sides of those lines are just night and day different.
And the politicians were going to improve the life of the poor by building housing projects. This was another one of their grand schemes, ones like the Brewster Douglas housing project. What happened?
What happened? Exactly what happens when federal officials try and plan a housing project. It falls to pieces. No time at all.
Thank you, Andrew and Charlie. Next, Detroit's mayor. He took 50 trips, went to nightclubs, rented limos, taxpayers paid for it. What's up with Detroit?
This unethical, illegal lynch mob mentality has to stop.
Detroit was once the most prosperous city in America. Where'd the money go? Well, the fall of the Big Three didn't help, but politicians made it worse. They squandered money. Detroit's mayors launched big projects like the People Mover, which turns out to only move people in one direction and not as many as they thought. Then there's the $350 million Renaissance Center and a very expensive jail. And when the money ran out and Detroit started to decay, politicians said things like this.
We shall go forward. Detroit shall again become the great city that is its destiny.
20 years later, Mayor Young was still in office making similar promises.
Detroit is alive and well. We're not coming back. We are back.
And when people criticized him and his fellow politicians, he called the critics racist.
To attack Detroit is to attack black.
That generally shuts people up. And a later mayor and his cronies found new ways to loot the city.
They turned City Hall into a den of bribes and kickbacks, making themselves rich.
What is the issue? Have I violated any rules? And I bet you come up with no.
Actually, a jury eventually came up with yes, convicted him of extortion. He'll be sentenced this fall. Now, there are crooked politicians and politicians who overpromise everywhere, but why is Detroit in the worst shape? Let's ask Shika Dalmia of the Reason Foundation. She lives in Detroit. Darcy Olson runs the Goldwater Institute, a think tank that studies local government. So, Shika, what happened to your town?
Well, Detroit turned into a one-party town. For 50 years, it's been ruled by one party, which means that, usually you get the evil party checking the stupid party and the stupid party checking the evil party. In Detroit's case, there was no such check, and you got out-of-control spending and corruption and waste.
But I assume they're not dumb. They know that someday somebody has to pay for this.
Yes, they are not dumb. They are just very greedy. Nobody is thinking about the long-term horizon. All they are thinking about is getting re-elected in 4 years and which constituency they need to buy in order to do that. And in Detroit, as all of Michigan, unions, and especially public unions, are extremely strong.
Now, Darcy, you study this around the country. What do cities do that's better?
Well, it's so interesting. Detroit used to be called the Paris of the Midwest. And of course, today, $28,000 debt per person. But it's a tale of two Americas, because you can look to other cities that are operating in the black with cash on hand, award-winning public parks, all kinds of things.
What's the difference?
Well, number one, let's look at Sandy Spring, Georgia. They're called the city that privatized nearly everything. By privatizing garbage, sewer, accounting, back office operations, even the courts, they cut the cost of government in half. And any city in America could benefit from just that one provision.
They have 5 government employees, but things still run well?
Well, when Shika was talking about the strength of the unions, that's something else that Sandy Springs has right. By privatizing all of these services, you don't have the unions. And so they only have 5 government employees there.
And the town it's smaller than Detroit, but still a seventh as big.
Right. I mean, it's 100,000 people. And in fact, there have been 5 more cities to come along and copy this Sandy Springs model.
And while Detroit is, what debt per person did you say?
$28,000 per person.
Sandy Springs?
No debt, operating totally in the black. Their charter requires them to have a cash operating reserve, and that's how they pay for a lot of capital projects.
Now, Shika, your town got into worse trouble because your last mayor was taking money for himself, Kilpatrick. He used city funds to fund junkets, 54 trips, limo rentals, nightclub charges, hired 29 of his closest friends and family for city positions, people didn't notice and scream?
Well, that was not even the worst of it. The worst of it was that he was actually receiving kickbacks for funds of his choice to give city contracts to his favorite cronies. It used to be called the Friends and Family Plan in Detroit. So Kwame Kilpatrick used to talk a very good game. He used to talk about bringing all kinds of glitzy development to Detroit, you know, new stadiums, new casinos, new events. And at the same time as he was talking up this big game, he was quietly siphoning the city coffers of money, which is one reason why he left Detroit in a worse financial mess than he found it.
All right, crooks are crooks, but even regular politicians wreck cities.
That's right.
I'm going to confront one of your city council members later on this show. I imagine he'll tell me, look, we want to make it easier for business. We're giving them tax breaks. And they have all these deals if you'll come in. What's wrong with that?
Well, what they are doing is they are giving tax breaks to businesses that they have handpicked. And these are, you know, this is just kind of the mentality of politicians, is they like big glamorous things. And at the same time as Detroit is subsidizing these big businesses, it is going after non-compliant little mom and pop stores that it says are operating illegally.
They have something called Operation Compliance. They brag, we're going to shut down 20 unlicensed businesses every week.
That's right.
But if they're unlicensed, maybe they should shut them down.
Well, you know, these unlicensed businesses are providing vital services to their residents. These are businesses that are, you know, selling cheap tires. They have secondhand appliances. You know, this is a city, understand, that's losing about 300 people every day. Its population has dropped from 2 million to under 700,000 now. This town needs businesses. It needs residents. And taxing them and regulating them is just going to drive more of them out.
Darcy, you list 3 things that all cities should do. You mentioned privatization. What are the other 2?
Well, transparency, which is a big one. Gaithersburg, Maryland has zero debt. They've had zero debt for 40 years. Everything they do, all of these contracts that it took investigative journalists to uncover in Detroit, all of those contracts in Gaithersburg are online. Audits, accounting, budgets,
posted on the website.
It helps so much. A little bit of sunshine lets people know what's going on, creates a culture of trust, and that's important for getting people to want to invest and come back into a city.
And before a city can get new debt, Goldwater says
voters should have to approve it. Bonds have to go before the voters, and quite often, because the voters are paying the taxes, they say no. So that's a great check on curbing these huge liabilities.
Despite all the debt, Detroit has the 3rd highest income tax of any major city, though after Philadelphia and Louisville, which aren't doing that great either. But Detroit is in the worst shape.
Well, you know, Detroit even taxes the utility bills of its residents. I think it might be the only city that does that. It has property taxes, it has business taxes, and it has utility taxes.
Thank you, Shika. Thank you, Darcy. Coming up, a libertarian has a plan to turn part of Detroit into a mostly government-free zone. Will that work? And I'll confront that politician who won't cut. But next, the main reason Detroit's broke.
We're at the end of the road. We can't borrow any more money. In fact, we really couldn't borrow any more money recently, so we started borrowing from our own pension funds. We owe them.
That was Kevin Orr, Detroit's new emergency manager, appointed after Detroit's elected politicians spent all the money. Actually, they spent billions more than the city had. How Orr is supposed to get Detroit out of that mess without stripping workers of their pensions and health care is not clear. Ken Sikkema is Michigan's former state majority leader. What's going to happen?
A judge is basically going to push the reset button here. It'll be the largest city in America ever to go into bankruptcy, federal bankruptcy, and
which unions means stiff everybody we owe?
Everybody that's owed money. The current workers, retirees, bondholders are going to have to get cut. Absolutely. This is a heavily unionized town. There's 47 separate public unions in the city of Detroit. In fact, some of the unions have the membership of only one. And it's hard for me to envision.
Each one you have to negotiate with?
Yeah, absolutely.
A one-man union?
It's a one-man union. And I just don't think politically a union can go to its members and say, yeah, we agreed to wage cuts or cuts to pensions or cuts to health care, which is why I think it ends up in front of a federal judge. And I think the manager, the emergency manager in Detroit, he might not say this to anybody. I think he prefers to be in Chapter 9. He has more power. A judge can say to the unions, you could protest all you want, but I want you in my courtroom 9 o'clock Monday morning. You get an hour to make your case, and then I'm going to make a decision. So I really think Kevin Orr prefers to be in Chapter 9.
And how big a haircut? The pensions are $3.5 billion in the red. That means a union worker who thinks he's got $50,000 a year might only get $30,000 a year, $10,000 a year?
Well, the judge is going to make that decision in a bankruptcy court. And, let me just say this. I have a great deal of sympathy for sort of the average pensioner or the average retiree, because they're not really getting a lot of money. There are some egregious examples.
And they did nothing wrong.
They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't negotiate the deals. They didn't underinvest in the pension fund. Detroit has two pension funds, one for police and fire and one for sort of general employees, which is the larger one. That pension fund is a mess. 30% of the investments are in real estate investments that have never returned a profit. There's no accountability.
So the political managers said, let's invest in this, and it made no money.
Well, somebody's friend, someone's uncle, someone's cousin. And that pension fund is under investigation as we speak.
I see that the pension board paid $22,000 to send 4 trustees to Hawaii.
And this is at a time when the pension fund is headed for bankruptcy itself. So, but once again, it's not the pensioners' fault. It's the fault of people who are mismanaging the fund. It's the fault of union contracts that the city could never afford.
But the politician says, I want to say yes, these guys will elect me, and when the bomb hits, I'll be long gone. Or do they even think that way?
Cities all over this nation deal with those kinds of problems. And the problem in the city of Detroit is the leaders never really confronted it and dealt with it. It was almost as if they were on remote control here, or autopilot, thinking somebody was going to come in and bail them out over time. And as we've seen in the promo to this segment and to your story here, those days are over. There is no more money. Borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and then Paul to pay Peter, those days are over. There's no money left.
Thank you, Ken Sikkema. Coming up, we'll confront one of those Detroit politicians. But next, a tour of Detroit's ruins.
There was a dead body that was found over here.
What's up with Detroit? The city's a mess. About 2/3 of its population left town. Whole neighborhoods are crumbling. Recently, special correspondent Kennedy walked through Detroit with community activists.
That house over there, right behind you, is literally being consumed by weeds.
That's one example of so many.
Kirk Mays works for one of the community groups that's trying to clean neighborhoods up. This one needs it, despite signs like this one. Much of it looks like a garbage dump.
Here's a garbage truck. I mean, that's good news, right?
Absolutely, that's the good news. But are they going to pick up all of this? I don't think so.
What is the strangest, creepiest thing or things they found as they try and remove the blight and the trash?
Well, the worst thing was an actual dead body.
Oh.
There was a dead body that was found over here. Boats, bowling balls, you name it, kitchen sinks, refrigerators, of course, tires, the remnants of life.
Many people left neighborhoods like these because there are so few basic services. Call 911 and the ambulance may not come.
The reality is Detroiters pick themselves up and put themselves in their cars to take their own selves to the hospital.
And yet, amidst the garbage and abandoned property, there is life.
You see this house, it's got a nice motorcycle out front. How does this person hang on?
Two things. One, they have hope, and two, they like their neighborhood.
They found the homeowner.
You've got empty lots next to you and empty houses across the street and another empty lot across the street.
Right.
What keeps you here?
Well, I want to stay here in the city, and I'm here.
Do you ever worry about what happens in the empty houses and whether or not people are going to come after your stuff?
Well, I kind of keep the lots cut, close the doors on the abandoned houses, stuff like that.
Do you keep an eye on them?
Yeah, you have to.
Did you used to have neighbors?
Yeah,
And people
They just move out.
Just gone. And this was typical of what you saw in Detroit, many places?
It was really interesting. Neighborhood after neighborhood, you would see nice streets with nice homes, and a block away, it was these abandoned, burned out homes, and they were being devoured by the earth. Detroit is falling back into the earth, and that's not all bad news.
No, but you live in
Believe
Los
it or not.
Angeles. It's not so great. It has some problem areas.
Oh, no,
That big a difference?
For your show, we've been to some really problem areas, and you see for sale signs, you see a lot of people moving out, homes underwater. People kind of give up and walk away. But that's just for sale signs. This is literally civilized society devolving into the state of nature. This is what they talk about, philosophers. When they talk about the state of nature, the reversion, this is happening in Detroit.
But you don't really see chaos.
The state of nature does not give way to chaos. It's not necessarily going to be chaotic. In fact, we found what I like to call accidental libertarians, people who are becoming so self-reliant. They know that their city government has failed them utterly. The services aren't there. The police aren't going to show up. So they have collected into groups. They are crafting gardens. They are keeping bees. They've got chickens. They've got a lot of open land now. So,
and you're going around with these community activists. They're all leftists, but they weren't saying, oh, we just need a new mayor, my guy in.
No, they were not talking about civic solutions. They were talking about getting together as neighbors, mentoring kids so the kids have something to do so they don't fall into crime, and making the best out of a situation that bad is not an acceptable word. It's something different from bad.
And one other area where Kennedy found hope, politicians have driven Detroit so far into the tank that prices are now cheap. It's a good place to start from scratch.
You can probably buy an empty lot here for anywhere from $100 to $500. You could probably buy a house here from anywhere from $500 to $10,000.
Kennedy checked out this abandoned house just a few blocks from Grosse Pointe, where the rich people live. The house had been gutted by thieves.
If you can see like new flooring, and obviously, you know, they've taken everything out. They've taken all the metal windows out. The appliances are gone. For $1,500, you could buy this house.
Right, and you could fix it up.
It's really incredible. You know, you think about first-time homeowners, you could literally own a house for $1,500, which is what a lot of people pay in rent.
That's true. So are you going to move there?
If I didn't have kids, I would absolutely move there. And I would tell people, if you are an urban survivalist, if you have had any desire to get into urban farming, move to Detroit. There's plenty of land. The people there are so infectious. I really enjoyed my time there because it was like surveying a war zone populated by saints. They were really awesome. They're banding together. And if you want to raise chickens and bees, Detroit is the bee's knees.
Thank you, Kennedy. Next, a man who has a plan to rescue Detroit, his version, by turning part of it into a free market paradise, away from the reach of government. Is that even possible?
29 years later, Belle Isle has become the Midwest tiger, rivaling Hong Kong and Singapore.
What can be done about a place like Detroit? Since it's so broke that often no one comes if you call 911. Some people there are finally ready to try new ideas, as this owner of a Detroit bar puts it.
Let's look at it with an open mind. Nothing else has worked. Really, we need some new ideas.
Here's a new idea. Take this island in the Detroit River, Belle Isle. It's now a park. And make it into a limited government paradise.
Belle Isle would have no need for taxes on income, on investment, or estates, making it a magnet for capital.
29 years later, Belle Isle has become the Midwest tiger, rivaling Hong Kong and Singapore.
Wait a second, we're ahead of ourselves, talking about 29 years later. That's speculation. The video was made by real estate developer Rod Lockwood. So, Rod, what do you want to do?
Well, I think the Belle Isle can be an opportunity for Detroit to once again regain its stature as a world-class city. The vision there is to, for us, we have an investment group to buy the island for $1 billion from the city of Detroit and to apply for Commonwealth status from the federal government, similar to what Northern Mariana Islands enjoy or Puerto Rico. And then over a period of time...
In Commonwealth, you have freedom to try new rules, different rules.
Right. We'd have our own laws and government taxation. We'd be business friendly. We try to model ourselves after Singapore, which has been a great success story. During the period of time that Detroit has gone from 2 million people down to 700,000 people, from 1950 to the present, Singapore has gone from 1 million people to 4 million people. So they're doing something right. So we would be business friendly. We would have some taxation principles which would make us very, very competitive. Number one is we would not tax anything we want to encourage. And number two, taxes have to be transparent to the taxpayer.
So you don't want to tax anything you want to encourage. You don't tax investment.
We don't tax investment. We don't tax labor income.
You do tax
consumption, perhaps a 10% consumption tax. And the primary tax would be a real estate tax, but it would only be on the raw land value of the property owner, not upon the improvements that that person puts on their land.
And you'd have to speak English to come to your community and bring in $300,000 to be a citizen.
However, we would have a process for having other people come, and we would waive the fee.
Why would you waive the fee?
Well, if it brings a special skill or they bring a burning desire to be free and make the case.
And do you really have serious investors who are...
Yes. Yep.
All right, well, plenty of people's response to this is, are you kidding me?
Finally, a consequence-free paradise for rich Americans. So thank you, Rod Lockwood, for showing the people of Detroit that when life gives you lemons, you take the lemons to your own island so you don't have to share any of the lemonade.
Your own island where you keep the lemonade. How does this benefit the poor people of Detroit?
A tremendous amount of capital is going to come in. People are not going to just sit there on the capital on the island. They are going to invest it nearby, and that will bring Detroit back because people will invest in Detroit.
Now, you wrote a book to try to explain this to people. It's titled Belle Isle, Detroit's Game Changer, which you hope it will be. The New York Times, I'm not surprised, sneered at you. A writer said, the book has the hero landing on the rooftop helipad of the 57-story hotel. It makes the entire scheme very easy to mock as objectivist fan fiction. Objectivist referring to Ayn Rand, and you are a fan of hers.
Yes, I am.
You talk about having $1 billion trying to buy this from the city. I would think a broke city would jump at that. But politicians often surprise me. Detroit City Council members, some of whom helped bankrupt the city, don't want to give up much of anything. When Michigan's governor offered to have the state take over Belle Island Park, since Detroit can't even afford to maintain it, local politicians screamed.
You may not take over Belle Isle. You may not take. It's not for sale. It's not for lease. It's not for giveaway. It's not for loan. It belongs to the people.
Belongs to the people, not to you.
This will create a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunity. Right now, Detroiters don't have any hope for the future. This would create that hope.
This could save Detroit just by bringing in new ideas and people and money.
I believe so. It would be our Singapore, or as Hong Kong is to China.
Well, I wish you luck. Thank you, Rod Lockwood. Next, did you know Detroit has thousands of valuable paintings, but it won't sell any? I'll confront one of the politicians who says no. Next. What's up with Detroit? The city can't pay its bills, so the state offers to save them $6 million a year by managing a park on Belle Isle. It would still be a park, it wouldn't go away, but Detroit pals oppose even that? Are they power mad? Well, the second highest ranking member of the Detroit City Council is Andre Spivey. So Councilman Spivey, why not sell stuff?
John, I was in favor initially of selling that or leasing that park actually to the state. We had a law department who had some outstanding issues. We wanted more time.
But I mean, $6 million you'd save right now. Why not just say yes?
Well, that was back. We are responsible for selling all assets to City Council, and a deal of this magnitude for 30 or 60 or 90 years, we felt we need to take our time, make sure the deal was advantageous for the City of Detroit. If we can find other ways to garner revenue, that's my platform right there, John.
But you can't find other ways. You're out of money.
Well, there are ways right now. Fortunately, we have an emergency manager, and we're looking to possibly sell assets. That's not our first priority. We're looking to slash our employee ranks. We're looking at our pension system. We're negotiating bond debt. Everything's on the table right now. We have to stop where we are, stop losing money, and begin to move the city forward, become financially solvent so that we can be a thriving city again.
Why only now? Why not do it before?
Well, we tried it, and keep in mind, John, this didn't happen overnight. This is 30 or 45 years in the making, and now this current council, the mayor under our watch, we tried some things. We could not go any further. We have legacy costs. We have declining population. We have declining revenues, and to do all those things in a 4-year period was just merely impossible.
But you have declining population and declining revenue because you guys spent so much that there were lousy city services.
Well, you're correct. Over the years, we did not allow ourselves to keep pace with the declining population. The city still continued to spend, and when we came into office, we cut the budget every single year. Nothing has been done like this in the city's history. The legislative body cut the budget more than the mayor. We did as much as we could at this point, but at this point, we are having people move into Detroit, John. There are thriving businesses. There are people moving in, families moving in, a revitalization taking place, but at the same time, we must get our city expenses on an even keel in order to have finances for city services so that people can have the good quality of life in our city.
The city has 140 acres of vacant land somebody wanted to sell. You opposed that.
I did oppose that. One reason, because the developer wants to grow trees. We don't need any more new trees in our city. We need people to tear down homes.
Why are you in a position to bargain?
To
Detroit's broke. I would think you would take any money.
We can't take it. Every deal is not a good deal. Every deal's not a good deal. It didn't look good to me at the time, and it still doesn't right now. Look good for me right now. He's going to tear down some homes, take care of some of the land, plant trees, plant shrubbery. We will have people who have a vacant house on either side of them and plant numerous trees and shrubs. They didn't move there for that. What they want is another home there, bringing a family there for property taxes and revenue, and that brings back a neighborhood, not simply planting trees in a neighborhood.
Well, I don't see why you politicians get to decide what neighborhoods are like, but that's not my business. What about the art in the art museum?
We live in those neighborhoods too, John. I'm sorry?
What about the art in the art museum? 60,000 artworks.
Yes, and we have valuable pieces of art, Van Gogh's self-portrait, Diego Rivera's mural on our wall. Those are all assets that we should have protected a long time ago. And I trust that that and other museums will not have to be sold off because we will never be able to get those assets back again. They belong to the people, and it's not the museum's fault, but we have the park, we have museums, we have numerous assets that could be up for sale, but I trust right now in the midst of negotiations, we can get our finances under control with our creditors, our bondholders, our pensions, and our employees.
But I just don't get it as you talk about this. The city's been going broke for a long time. You've got 60,000 paintings. The Van Gogh itself might be worth $200 million.
And it will be considered.
Some other people can look at it in some other town who can afford it.
And we can't afford it because we can't afford the museum for one. But that's one issue.
So sell the paintings.
It's one issue. The painting belongs to the people, and that's a small issue compared to what we're going through. We have legacy costs. We have people who've moved out of Detroit. There's some things that we have to do to change ourselves so we don't find ourselves come back in here again in order to make sure that we are not in this kind of deficit in years to come for my children when they reach of adult age.
Since Detroit is broke, how come you have 6 staffers working for you?
I do not have 6 staffers. When I began 4 years, John, we had a budget of $600,000. Right now, we're down to $230,000. I have 3 people to leave. I have 3 persons working now, and 1 may be leaving sometime shortly. So we're doing the same amount of work.
On your website, it says you have a community liaison, a chief of staff, chief of policy, 6 people. secretaries?
No, we have 4 right now, John. We'll update the website, but I can tell you right now I'm paying for 4 people.
When the city's broke, why do you have any?
Well, how do we get things done? The government still needs to work and to operate. People call our office. We still meet on a weekly basis. We handle constituent complaints. And one person, myself, can't do it alone. I can't answer the phone, be at the council table, be in the community. We do need some person in our office working for the citizens in the city of Detroit.
Thank you, Councilman Spivey.
Thank you, John. I had a great time.
I find it frightening that our financial future will be determined by politicians like those on Detroit City Council. This is a problem for all of America. Government officials rarely want to give anything up. Last year, Hewlett-Packard fired 27,000 workers. IBM and GE laid off 100,000 when expenses got too high. People were upset, but the companies had to do it to survive. In the private sector, we make hard decisions like that all the time. People usually don't even hear about it. But in government, they call any cut a crisis. And even in Detroit, where you call 911 and no one may respond, officials won't even sell a few paintings or let someone else manage one park or cut their 4-person staff. Give me a break. If the rest of America's governance is anything like Detroit's, America is in big trouble. That's our show. See you next week.